Hey guys, welcome back again to the Cut Light and Smoke podcast. Today we have an absolute banger of a guest on today. You're going to see the porn coach here in 1 second, and I'm going to explain everything to you all next on the Cut Light and Smoke podcast. That was a little different intro than I usually do, guys. Sorry about that. We're coming to you live from the Huddle Up Store studios here in beautiful, rainy, actually today, rainy, Phoenix, Arizona, and JB's on my left. This guy in the middle is a new friend that I actually met, and his shirt and merch does not betray him at all. He is an actual porn coach. We're going to talk about that a little bit, and men and pornography and everything else like that. It's not what you think, but it is what you think, and we're going to get into a lot of it today. But first thing I want to say is thank you so much for being here, Austin. This is Austin, Austin, tell me your whole name and all the good stuff.
Austin Hamilton. I'm a porn coach, and I am so glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, dude. So we're fairly new friends. I mean, we're still feeling out all the things between us and everything, but we have a mutual friend, and essentially we met each other at a cigar event, right?
Cigar night.
Yeah, we had a cigar night with a bunch of guys, and he comes over. I think he was actually wearing his merch or something like that, and I'm like, so you're a porn... It was actually a church type thing, right, with a bunch of Christian guys. I'm like, so you're like a porn... How does this thing work? And then you proceeded to tell me your story. So do me a favor and tell everyone your story about how you got into this and what you do now when it comes to pornography.
Yeah. Well, so I'm a porn coach, Pxrn coach, because if you say Porn, sometimes some social media sites don't like that. So porn coach is the name. TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, you can find me. Basically about a year ago, I started making videos just sharing my story, talking about my addiction to pornography as well as the infidelities and affairs that I had while I was married. Still married, same woman, been married coming up on 13 years here. And essentially 6.5, 7 years ago, blew up my marriage, blew up my life when I revealed to my wife that I had a porn addiction and was also not being faithful to her. And by the grace of God, we've been able to restore our marriage into something that I think is beautiful today, because there's nothing between us to hide. There's nothing between us. Everything is out on the table, and I live to tell the tale, so to speak.
Okay.
And now as a porn coach, I help other people get free from pornography as well.
Okay.
There's a lot of people out there struggling with it, and there is a path to freedom. So that's what I do. So
let me ask you some stats if I can right now. So, because I don't know the stats off the top of my head, I know of, porn. I know porn's a big thing. How many guys roughly see porn a day? I mean, how many people struggle with porn, and how do you define addiction versus struggle? Yeah. I mean, can you separate that, or is it the same thing? Or tell me a little bit about how you define that.
Yeah, good question. I just did a video on this. There's a stat, I think it was from Covenant Eyes or Fight the New Drug, one of the two. It's like 28,900 some people per second are viewing pornography. I think that was in the United States. You can look up that video I just posted.
28,000 per second?
Per second. So that's a lot of people. Now, it's hard to actually find accurate data. There's a lot of different studies, but basically the way I kind of boil it down is roughly 95% of men, give or take, have some sort of struggle with pornography. So higher than 9 out of 10.
Okay.
Some sort of struggle. And then the data also suggests that roughly 60 to 65%, so 2/3, have what might be categorized as some sort of pornography addiction.
Okay.
Right? So basically 9 out of 10 have some sort of struggle, and then basically 2/3 have some sort of addiction. So the way I like to do this when I present this is, if it's not you, it's both the guys next to you.
And there you go, folks. We're going to go ahead and end the video now. So thanks for coming in for Austin and putting all my dirty laundry out there.
Yeah, exactly.
Mother.
So just to paint the picture of like what it's like, you're walking around in public. Yeah. If it's not you, both the guys next to you have some sort of addiction. Now, if you don't like the numbers, you don't like the data, you're like, cite your sources. Say it's half wrong.
Okay. Sure. Yeah. Still.
If it's not me, it's not the guys next to me. It's the two guys next to them.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
So it's a big problem.
Sure.
Now, the way I define addiction, there's all sorts of clinical ways you can define addiction. Obviously, you can read up on that. What I like to say is, do you think it's a problem? Do you want to stop? Have you tried to stop? And have you been able to stop? If you do think it's a problem, you've tried to stop. If you think it's a problem, you want to stop, and you've tried to stop and you can't stop, I don't care what you call it. You might consider referring to it as an addiction and treating it as such. So that's how I define addiction. There's ways that you can back that into like a clinical diagnosis. I don't really play that game. Labeling it is important, but at the end of the day, is it a problem and do you want to stop?
So if you were to define the difference between struggling and addiction, Okay, the addiction is you've tried to stop and everything else like that. The struggle is a guy who sees porn once a month or sees porn once a year, sees porn, and I say sees porn as actively goes to it, not a matter of like a pop-up or something like that, or a girl walking down the street or something like that. It's a whole different thing, I think. But we're talking about somebody who actively goes to it. So you're saying that most guys are actively going to that. 95% of guys are actively going to porn, on a daily basis.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, maybe not necessarily on a daily basis, right? That's again, frequency can help inform like what's really going on there.
Okay.
I've worked with guys. I've seen people where it could be every 3 months, every 6 months that they're turning to it, and it would still be classified as an addiction. Right?
Okay.
I think a better term than porn addiction is the term unwanted sexual behavior.
Okay.
Because for most guys, certainly for myself included, it's I'm doing this thing, but I actually don't want it in my life. But I just don't know where to go from there. So unwanted sexual behavior indicates I don't want this. Now I have the power to change it, right? Because I'm naming the fact that I don't want it in my life.
So what is the difference, Austin, between sexual addiction and porn addiction? Or is it one and the same? And what's the, from your experience or from guys that you've worked with and so on and so forth, or women even that you've worked with, what's been the difference? Or is there a difference, or is it one and the same?
Yeah, so first just on, who I work with. I work both with men dealing with porn or sex addiction and women who are dealing with betrayal trauma. Betrayal trauma is the trauma that somebody experiences after a betrayal.
It's a good cigar, huh?
It's a good cigar, yeah. Well, when you get that smoke right back in,
Right.
Betrayal trauma is the trauma that somebody experiences after betrayal. So, for example, when they find out that their husband of 20 years has been having a secret pornography addiction, or they've been, having affairs or doing other sexual behavior, or it could be even, boyfriend, girlfriend, you find out that your partner is dealing with pornography. So that's what the betrayal trauma portion of what I do is. Now, the difference between porn addiction and sex addiction, there are two different things. So, pornography as we know it today is relatively new with the term in terms of how severe it is, what types of content there is, and how readily available it is, right? Any of us could pull out our phones right now and within 2 seconds have the most heinous stuff available to us on the screen.
Sure.
That it just wasn't available hundreds of years ago, right? Even within the last century. So it's very different. And within the last 20 years or so, it is kind of classified as two different things, porn addiction and sex addiction. I'll work with guys who they've never had an affair. They've never paid for anything in real life. It's just pornography. It could be pornography. They're watching it 5, 6, 7 times a day. It's just pornography. They have no desire at that moment to go outside of their relationship and be with another person in real life. And then on the sex addiction side, it's, can I say like massage parlor, strip club?
Sure,
hooker,
you can say anything.
all that stuff.
Doesn't matter. Yeah, you can say any way you want. Yeah, dude.
I'm so trained to like not say all these things when I'm on TikTok.
No, say whatever you want. Say whatever you want. So
sex addiction would look more like somebody who's, having affairs, going to a strip club, seeing a prostitute, going to a massage parlor, things like that. Usually there's pornography involved as well. But, that is a different category of behavior.
Okay.
And I also, I don't say one is better or worse. They're just different.
Sure,
They're very different. Sure. So
what, you said you've been through this yourself. I didn't know that part, to be honest with you. I didn't know that you had an affair on your wife or anything like that or anything like that. How did you work through that? Like, tell me, first off, what was that like in your life to come through such a difficult process? Because I can imagine there's guys listening right now that are either having affairs, addicted to porn, or are thinking about doing those things or thinking about coming out of that. What was that process like for you in particular?
Yeah, well, 9 out of 10 of them are.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So. Yeah.
It's one of those.
They're all looking at the camera. They're all looking at different places. They're like,
it's not me.
It's definitely Bradley.
I'm not gonna lie.
Bradley.
It's most likely it's me out of these three. I'm just saying.
Most likely.
It's not, but it's most likely that it's me.
He was really definite with that. It's not. Notice I'm not defending myself. I'm just sitting there. I'm along for the ride.
I'm just saying you might find my feet pic somewhere, but I'm not going to tell you where.
Right.
I always believe people with what they're telling me.
Sure.
Right.
Sure.
So you have to. And you can probe for more information. What was the question again?
What was it like for you?
What was it like for me?
What was it like for you coming through?
Yeah.
Coming out of porn addiction and explaining to your wife this is what happened, and then you said you had affairs as well, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So, It was terrible, man. Like it was rock bottom in my life. My wife was 8 months pregnant with our second child, girl, our first daughter. And we were going through a marriage retreat. And I thought like, yeah, our marriage is fine. Like maybe we can learn something. She didn't know anything at that point. She never caught me with pornography. She had no idea that the affairs were happening. She was literally blindsided by this. So as a result of going to this marriage workshop, I realized that I was a giant douchebag in every aspect of my life. As a husband, as a father, as a son, as an employee, as a friend, I was like, I suck as a person. It was that rock bottom point of like, I don't even want to live anymore. And I wouldn't say it's like I was suicidal, but it was more like, what am I doing in this life? If I look at the experience that I'm creating with the people around me who I claim I love, if I were to survey them and say like, what do you actually think of Austin Hamilton? They'd be like, that guy's a douchebag.
Wow.
And so coming to that realization of, I got to get right for myself. And if and until I do that, there's no shot that I have at being a good husband or father or son or employer or employee or friend. Right. So I got to get my stuff right with God ultimately so that I can be a light and a provision to other people.
Okay.
And so through that process was like, I got to tell her. I swore that my behavior actually stopped 4 years prior. The affairs were 4 years prior to me confessing. There was some pornography use between the 4 years prior and when I confessed. But I swore I'd take it to the grave. I said, I'm never going to tell anybody this. I'm taking it to the grave. And that basically killed me. Unconfessed sin will kill you. The wages of sin is death. And so I'm like, I got to do something with this so that I can live my life for the sake of myself and those around me. So I confessed to my wife. It was one of the hardest things I ever did, sitting there looking at my wife, 8 months pregnant, about to bring our child into the world, and saying, here's everything I've done. It was devastating. Very, very hard time for her, for me, for our family unit. And so, that really began the process of living in reality of what's going on and the healing work. I immediately started seeing a therapist, counselor, seeing the pastors that were in my life at the time. She began seeing a therapist immediately. And we were both in that kind of intense work for the better part of a year, intense one-on-one work. I went away to some like weekend retreats, transformational development workshops, just looking at myself and how I got into the situation to begin with. But look, the reality is here we are 6.5 years later, we're happily married and our marriage is perfect now. We have no problems.
Right.
No.
Okay, Jesus.
The reality. The reality is all of our problems are on display and we get to work through them for the sake of love.
Yeah. Yeah.
We don't have to, we get to be in this mess that is the human condition, right? Being a sinner. And getting to enter into restoration, reconciliation, repentance, forgiveness. Like that's what it means to be human. That's what it means to be in a relationship. It's been said that relationships start at the first point of major conflict. Or you realize it was just an arrangement of convenience. And for all intents and purposes, I'm like, our marriage, it really started then. We've been married 12 and a half years. It's like we had our first 6-year marriage. That one sucked. And then we now have this latest 6-year marriage, and this is where the actual relationship began.
So, when you say things like, marriage is you're meant to work through things, and conflict. I mean, I believe that conflict when it's worked through on both sides leads to intimacy. I really believe that.
Oh yeah.
So, how did your wife take all of this? Like, how was that, and then to this day, because first off, you're probably the only person I've ever met that, maybe I have 2 other guys, and I've worked with hundreds of guys, by the way, so that has made it in their marriage with infidelity. That's made it, thus far, if you would. So most guys last a year or 2 after even the confession. Yeah, maybe a year or 2, max 2. Max 2 is what's been my experience. And it isn't even on their part; it's their wife. So I guess the question is, what in that endeared you, to her? Obviously, the forgiveness and love and everything else like that. But what are some practical tips if guys are getting ready to come out to their wife and their family and things like that with this deep dark secret they've been holding for a very long time? What's some advice that you could give them that this could? The road's hard regardless of what you look at it. It's a bumpy, crazy, nasty road. Yeah. So what's some things that you believe that you could tell them that could help them communicate this, particularly the most important person in their life, which would be their wife or their girlfriend or significant other?
Oh man. Well, there's like 9 questions in there, but we'll see what comes up.
Yeah, there's like one that was asked, but there's nine implications. Yeah.
Yeah. Basically, look, this has nothing to do with porn and sex. Porn and sex addiction is not a porn and sex problem. It's a how you deal with life problem. I didn't know how to deal with life, with the pain, the suffering, the sadness, happiness, anxiety, depression. I had no idea how to handle what was coming at me in life. The best idea I had is when life gets stressful or whatever was to go look at porn and masturbate or to go, act outside my marriage. Mm-hmm. I didn't do drugs. I didn't drink really. This is new. Like I've only smoked a handful of cigars and that's been in the last year. And since I met you, it's really ramped up a notch in the last couple months.
That seems to happen. Right?
Yeah. It gets better. It gets better. There's more cigars.
Seems to happen.
Yeah.
So I just didn't know how to deal with the things in my life. That's the best idea I had. I didn't know how to feel my emotions. Mm-hmm. So really it required diving into my story. You mentioned intimacy. A definition I like for intimacy is into me see. Mm-hmm. Let me show you everything in here. And I want to see everything in you so I can know your story and you can know my story. And then we can actually know each other. Mm-hmm. But we tend to hide that from each other. And so what actually unraveled this process is I never came to terms with some of the trauma that happened in my life. So my mom died when I was 5 years old in a plane crash. Boom, mom's gone. What did I do with that as a 5-year-old? I stuffed it in. That was kind of the way that my family, whether consciously or unconsciously, we chose to handle it was don't talk about it. Let's pretend like everything's okay. So I believe that, right? It's like, well, let's not talk about the hard things in life that are actually present. Let's just pretend like it doesn't exist. And that's the way that I carried my life up until I was 32 years old, sitting in that room in this marriage conference with my wife. I literally said, my mom died when I was 5 and it hasn't affected me. Okay, well, that's bullshit, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Obviously that affected me severely. So again, the path for me wasn't, hey, I masturbated and looked at porn, a bunch of times when we were married. Hey, I went out and acted outside of our marriage. The story here is this 5-year-old has never healed from the trauma that he experienced as a kid. And, now when I'm 10, 11, 12 years old, I find porn. Oh, that feels good. That makes the pain go away. So let's do that. Let's do that for a while. Right. And then that turns into something else. Nobody wakes up, in my opinion, nobody wakes up one day that's happily married and says, today's the day I'm going to go cheat on my wife. It doesn't work like that. It starts somewhere with some root that festers over time if it's not dealt with or handled. So the invitation is what's really going on in your life beneath the surface that you haven't actually processed through. And it's informing every behavior that you have today. Usually there's some sort of family of origin, family system stuff at play, right? Abandonment, divorce, death of a loved one, being unwanted, not being cared for enough. And it all manifests in unhealthy coping mechanisms such as sex, drugs, pick your poison, right?
So guys that are going through this right now, or guys who are getting ready to reveal this, is this I guess would a prescription be to first recognize that there's something going on deep down inside that you need to deal with? And I think everybody has that. I think most guys, we're too busy with our day and with just life and the war that we go through in life that we don't recognize that enough, or we shoved it so far down we don't see it. We don't see it. And so we don't have a band of brothers or anybody, mentors or anybody like that asking us about that child wound or whatever else that would be for every guy that's out there, whether it's, performance anxiety or whatever you want to call it. That happens continually. So would the prescription be first figure that out, then confess, get help, and then confess? I mean, if you're writing a prescription for this, if you're going, hey, because guys are how-to guys. I'm a how-to guy. So first I recognize what the deep down wound is. The second thing I do is talk to a counselor or talk to somebody who's more knowledgeable than me about this, then reveal that to my family? Or is there a different way to go about that? That would be optimal in your opinion?
Yeah. Yes.
You asking him to give out free advice right now, dude?
No.
I'll give all the free advice. Right?
Sure. I think a lot of guys that might struggle with this will go, okay, so I see you got a point. I think a lot of guys will go, you have a point, Austin. That's a point. There's some things I definitely need to look at. I'm not sure how to share this with my spouse. in my family, which could ruin everything that I've ever worked for. And that spot of healing you can't heal without revealing that. That's a fact, because once everything's brought to the light, then you can heal, but you can't heal until that's brought to the light. So a guy who's at home listening to this going, okay, porn coach, what do I do now?
Yeah.
What's my steps?
Yeah. Great. My answer to that is, I don't know. Every situation is different.
Okay.
All right. I wish that there was like a prescriptive method for it, but I would just say generally a saying that I say all the time, I think it comes from Johann Hari. He's written some books. The opposite of addiction is not sobriety. It's connection with other people. The opposite of addiction is not sobriety. It's connection with other people. So what does connection mean? It means you have to share something, like share what's going on in order to connect with other people. And when we feel connected, when we feel like we're actually seen, known, and loved for exactly who we are, where we are, that changes everything for a person. We generally internalize something or keep the shame inside because we think that we're going to be judged for it. Shame festers in the darkness, but it can't stand being spoken to the light. So if you name the shame and you speak it out, it loses its power. Now, how do you go about doing that? That's when I say, I don't know. I don't know what's appropriate for every situation. When my wife and I came off of this marriage retreat, it was Friday, Saturday, Sunday. During the course of that weekend, I decided I was going to tell her. Still, nobody knew. I decided I was going to tell her. So Monday morning, I called a friend of mine who's a pastor, local pastor. He has a very public story about his infidelity. And I'd been friends with him. We went to lunch probably once a quarter at that time. He didn't know. Monday morning, I called him. I said, hey, bro, I got a problem. Hey, what's going on? I've been cheating on my wife, watching porn, blah, blah, blah. He's like, great. Welcome to the party. Your life is going to change forever. It's like, I want to tell her. So he's like, go meet with this counselor, friend of his. So I go meet with him the next day. And I tell him the whole story, and I'm like, I got to tell her. And he's like, she's 8 months pregnant? I'm like, yeah. And he's like, yeah, I wouldn't do that. And I was like, okay, well, I'm going to do it anyway. So I told my wife that Friday, I believe it was. So the point is there's no prescriptive method. Who do you tell first? Who do you go to first? You got to know the relationships in your life and what that system can handle. And you also have to have support. So for me, in my wisdom, I was like, I'm not telling my wife in this weekend conference in front of 20 other couples that we're friends with. I'm not going to say in this room, hey, guess what I've done? Right? I'm like, I got to talk to somebody else to walk me through this. So I sought wise counsel, who referred me to somebody else who sought wise counsel. And then I, went and confessed and began that journey. But again, the theme is you have to disclose what's going on to somebody. Now I would say the mistake, mistake's probably not the right word, but where I see a lot of people go in paths that aren't going to serve them is they tell their wife, or they get caught by their wife, and then it stays only between the two of them. And that's like a surefire path for more destruction. Because again, the opposite of addiction is not sobriety, it's connection. If you're not connected with other people, if other people don't know your story, where contextually appropriate, you guys are just going to spin around, because she's not trained to deal with this, nor should she be the person who is the one who walks this out for you. Obviously, she can be a provision for you and choose to love and forgive, but she's going to be going through all her stuff, all her trauma. So I don't know what the right path is. It could be tell your wife, say, hey, look, I got a problem. I really want to get help. And then you go get help. It could be going straight to a therapist or a counselor. If you're a person of faith, it could be going to your pastor and saying, hey, here's the problem. Name it, voice it to the light, tell people what's going on. And once you do that, everything will change, and now you can get help. You can't change what you don't name, and it takes courage to name what you're not wanting to face.
Did you have a band of brothers around you when you walked through it?
Yeah.
What was their reaction to all of that?
Well, I mean, the one guy, my pastor friend, he was happy. He was happy for me. He's like, Austin, I knew you were a douchebag. I just didn't know really what was going on.
Right.
And he's like, now I feel like I can actually love you. And coming right here, I had lunch with him just now before I came here. And it's awesome what that relationship has been able to continue to blossom into.
Wow.
And so that journey for me was, okay, I got to start talking about this with more people. So I shared this with other friends, people in my small group, in other faith settings. I started leading recovery groups, and now I talk about it on TikTok all day. So it's like, cat's out of the bag. But it's hard to rip the Band-Aid off for the first time with this or any shame that we have going on in our life, because we want to keep running that con that we have everything together and everything's nice and buttoned up. But the reality is nobody really has everything together, right? I mean,
right.
Like
no, not at all. Not at all. What ways do you see guys try to hide this? Like if they know, so when guys know this is a weakness, I guess my question would be, you're gonna have a contingency out there that go, what is the big deal, dude? It's just porn. Mm-hmm. Okay. And that's cultural today. I mean, I know guy culture and everything else like that. If anything, I mean, I know this much. It's not a big deal, and guys could be quick enough to find a free porn site versus a Bible verse any day. They really absolutely could. So in that regard, what do you say to the guys that it's not a big problem, dude? I do it. I get my nut off, and then I just go on with with my day, and I'm fine. And or the guys who are in the faith community, right? Guys who are in the faith community that think that maybe this is not a good thing to do, but it's better than going and having sex with a girl than just doing this versus anything else. How was this harming me?
Yeah, well, the first thing I say is, if that's really what you believe, be clear with that and tell your spouse. And then I would talk to the spouse and say, do you really want to be with a person who has this point of view? Period. So let's have clarity first. If you enjoy masturbating to other people having sex, in many cases unconsensually, right? Go look up on how the sausage is made in the porn industry. Mm-hmm. If you enjoy and you think that's a righteous, noble activity.
I think you said sauce, but I heard sausage.
I said sausage.
I don't even understand. I'm sorry. Yeah. I'm sorry.
There's a lot of wiener puns going on here.
Right.
If you're really proud of that, then be proud of that. Mm-hmm. Tell your spouse. Stop hiding it. Mm-hmm. And now your spouse can make an informed decision as opposed to thinking that you're actually a different person. So now there's clarity there.
Okay.
And in my experience, it usually takes about 5 questions for me to ask a guy to get him to the point where they're like, oh yeah, it's a problem. Right? Lately, a lot of my content's been focused around the notion of monogamy. Mm-hmm. And I made the assertion that if you're watching pornography, you're not in a monogamous relationship. So don't pretend like you are.
Right.
Definition of monogamy is a sexual relationship between 2 people. Mm-hmm. Mm. And generally, when you're in a relationship, especially a marriage in the West, where you say vows like "I'm yours, you're mine, mind, body, and soul," you're literally explicitly making that commitment.
Right.
Now, many dating relationships, you don't have an explicit agreement. Mm-hmm. Right. It's implied that you're only committed to one another, but it's not explicit. Mm. So then you look at the definition of monogamy being a sexual relationship between 2 people. It's like, well, if you're introducing any other person to that, whether it's on a screen or otherwise, by definition, you're going against the monogamous agreement, and therefore you're cheating. So again, naming the reality of what's going on here. Many guys at first, they don't want to acknowledge it. Oh, it's just a person on a screen. Well, it's still a person. And they're like, oh, well, it's not sexual because it's on a screen. Well, are you playing with your dinghy while you're watching it? Seems pretty sexual to me.
Right. What do you think about the conversations in the red pill community about this stuff? I mean, when I say red pill, I'm talking about like the Whatever podcast, Fresh and Fit, things like that. Have you ever seen any of that?
I've seen a little clips on the the Whatever podcast.
Whatever, he brings on OnlyFans girls, and then he basically berates them the whole time, and then there's accusations that secretly they're all hooking up behind closed doors or whatever else. I don't know if that's true. Mm-hmm. I just know that there's allegedly things going on like that, which wouldn't surprise me. But my question would be, do you see that happening more and more? And I mean, I guess I'm gonna ask this very careful because this is gonna cause some serious conflict if I get it wrong. And I mean that sincerely. I think I worry about good guys like my friend I just met, right? Being in such a crazy industry and still staying pure in the industry. Does it make sense? Being such a crazy, I mean, it's like the XXX church guys and all these other guys that do, anti-porn stuff. They're in the midst of it. And now keep this in mind as a guy who, I'll self-proclaim say this, and you can lie check me or whatever you want to call it. I don't really struggle with porn. I just really don't. I'm an egomaniac. I'm everything else you can say about me. For whatever reason, I don't have that DNA thing. I find women attractive and everything like that and all that kind of stuff. But for whatever reason, it's never been a big thing. But I wouldn't go into it. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't go into it because I don't think I could. Literally, I don't think I could hand out. And so with guys like you who are just awesome guys, and I greatly respect what you do. How do you protect yourself in that?
Yeah.
With I mean, and how do you differentiate yourself from the rest of the red pill community? So that's like 5 questions. So pick one. Yeah. Sorry.
You give me a lot to go off of.
Sorry, man.
Well, what I'm hearing is kind of like how do I maintain accountability while doing what I do?
Sure.
Right?
Yeah, that'd be good. Yeah.
So one, so there's a Viktor Frankl quote. I quote Viktor Frankl all the time, Holocaust survivor. He wrote the book Man's Search for Meaning. It's a fantastic book, and I would recommend anybody read it. Everybody read it. He has a line, something like, I'm paraphrasing, but it's, never judge another person because I probably would have done exactly the same thing they did if I was in the exact same circumstance that they were. Mm-hmm. Right? So I debate a lot of OnlyFans performers. I debated a prostitute in the Netherlands one time. I've had people on both sides of this all the time who I debate or have conversations with. Mm-hmm. And what I have to ground myself in is I might have done the same thing that they did if I was in their exact same position.
Right.
I'm like 3 bad decisions away from being a cracked out heroin addict, in the back alley somewhere in downtown Phoenix. That's just the reality of life.
Right.
Nobody is immune to falling into that. So what's the accountability structure that I have in place? Well, one, it's maintaining that there's always hope for somebody no matter what circumstance that they're in. Like I'm almost, how do I put it? It's almost like I err too much on the side of like there's always hope. Because I do believe there's always hope no matter what circumstance you're in, you can rise up out of it. Also, like with my social media, I get DMs all the time. People give me novels about their life. My wife has access to everything, all my social accounts, my email. No message can get to me without my wife knowing about it if she wants to know about it. Mm-hmm. I don't know if she's ever logged into the accounts. It doesn't matter to me. She has access to it. I also have a person who does social media for me, and she has access to all of my accounts as well. Mm-hmm. So nothing can get to me that at least 2 other people can't have access to, and both of those people are females who are kind of on my team, so to speak. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, we'll talk about Jesus for a second. I'll never forget a pastor, it's a long time ago. Jesus ministered to the prostitutes. He hung out with the prostitutes.
Absolutely.
Ate dinner with them, yep.
Ate dinner with them.
Yep.
But it wasn't inside the brothel.
Correct.
Right? So it's like, if I look at it from a ministry standpoint, like, would I go into a strip club? I've never been to a strip club, believe it or not. Never been to a strip club. Don't want to go.
Me neither. Yeah.
Never was something. I'm like, no. Mm-hmm. I've talked to strippers. I'll talk to them. I'll be with them. I'll talk about their story and all that and kind of extract what's going on. But like, would it be wise for me to go into a strip club and be like, I'm going to talk to strippers about like this being bad? No.
Yeah.
Why would I go there? Right? There have been times like when I'm on TikTok and somebody will come on my live and I'll bring them on and immediately I'll just be like, nope, like we're done with this conversation. So there's kind of like that wisdom and accountability and discernment, but also having other people around me because I have blind spots.
Yeah.
Like so many of them. I do so much dumb stuff all the time.
Yeah.
And so you got to have people in your life who know what's going on about, again, being transparent about what's going on. Now, specifically with the Whatever podcast, again, I haven't watched it that much. I do know like the one guy, I don't know if he's the main guy, but
Brian,
if I'm thinking of the right person, he seems pretty solid.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And now I also am like, what are you trying to create here? Because there's a lot of stuff.
That's a great question,
It's
bro.
shock factor, bro.
Yeah,
it's shock factor to an extreme.
There's not a lot left to the imagination. We'll just say that in the
No.
clips that I've seen. So like, it's
Yeah.
like, well, are you really helping the cause here? Or are you trying to do this to get clicks and views, which is working, right? And again, I preface that to say I have no, I'm not down on that at all. I haven't studied it enough, but.
So are all those models that are showing up, because every single simp guy that's showing up to that channel is going out to check her out.
Yeah, exactly. They're going straight to OnlyFans, checking it out and everything else like that, yeah.
Yeah, so, like, and I've had a number of OnlyFans creators on my streams, on my content, and I'm not going to promote them.
Obviously.
But, what I try to do is just engage in a healthy debate. And I've never had, to this date, knock on wood, I've never had a debate go awry, so to speak. It's always, that's the one thing. When I bring somebody on, I say, look, what I'm committed to and what I would ask you to as well is we have a respectful conversation here. And if that goes awry, we're done. And it hasn't deviated from that. Mm-hmm. So I think the broader context of that question is, my goal is actually not to get guys to stop watching porn. My goal is to get people to start living a more meaningful, purposeful life. And generally when you do that, you stop the unwanted behaviors, right? The drinking, the smoking, the drugs, the gambling, the whatever it is, right? So, there's like Fight the New Drug. If you know Fight the New Drug, go follow them. If you don't, they are the best, in my opinion, at like fighting against the porn industry. They do a great job at that. I'm not going to do it better than them. I'm not trying to. What I'm trying to do is help people see that there's a bigger purpose and meaning for your life. And once you start living in that, the addictive behaviors will go away. It's oversimplifying it, right? But
Sure.
Viktor Frankl, a man without meaning or purpose will just distract himself with pleasure. And so once you find that meaning and purpose, the distraction with pleasure, you won't want to do that anymore.
Yeah, was there a verse about an idle mind or a saying that always talks
Yeah,
about like an idle mind?
the devil's playground.
Yeah,
Right? Idle mind's devil's playground.
So that you said two things that really interested me, and one of them was about like communication, because that basically fills that idle mind with a relationship and communication with somebody else, right? That was really interesting to me. And two, I never would have related any kind of childhood trauma to somebody's porn addiction. That's really unique in a side of things that, unless I heard it from somebody that came from that, and that was their kind of point that they needed to figure out, I don't think I ever would have put two and two together that people might struggle with that as a result of things that have happened in their past or as kids.
Yeah. Well, there's almost always a thread to some sort of pain. There's a root of that, right? And oftentimes it's death, divorce, abandonment, bullying. Something happened, and during that time, pornography was discovered as an escape from whatever it was that they were going through. And then it just grows from there, right? So, one of the first questions I ask people when I work with them, like with my one-on-one clients, is, all right, why do you look at porn? Like, oh, I don't know, because it feels good. Okay, yeah, I get that. Like, let's dig deeper beneath the surface. What are you really seeking there? Is it acceptance, comfort, love? Like for me, I can draw a straight line from when my mom died and I was 5 years old in a plane crash to acting outside my marriage. All I wanted was affection and love. It's like that's a theme of my life. This was tragically gone when I'm 5 years old, and I've just been living life trying to say, like, does anybody love me? Does anybody love me? Does anybody love me? And it wasn't until I could rest in that assurance from God, from Jesus, saying like, no, I got you. You are loved. You're deeply beloved. No matter what you do, I still love you. I still got you. And that's a message that never really pierced my thick skull until a few years ago. And so now I can stop worrying about that.
Wow.
But that's what pornography does. Is it makes you feel better, right? So then there's the whole brain science on dopamine and how our dopamine receptors work, and like just trying to get the next hit of dopamine. Great book called Dopamine Nation has been really popular lately. It talks about that. So once your brain is hijacked by pornography, now the whole brain chemistry, it's very difficult to get out of it because of what you have to continue doing in order to keep the dopamine hit, keeping you happy, so to speak, or at least you think you're happy. And until you can disrupt that and get to the root of the problem and start living your life in a different way, it's going to persist. You have to be honest about why you're doing that in the first place.
Let me ask a couple questions. You work with people currently. You currently work with people. The amount of people that come to you and ask you about getting out of this and everything else like that. You shared one of the main key things that happens. There's childhood trauma somewhere. Are there other variables that people share, when it comes to porn addiction? That other people, I mean, for example, like guys would go, if you say things like, a narcissistic attitude, things like that, I mean, you can start saying that. Some people, the reason I'm asking this for the question is some people could self-identify those things and be able to be warned ahead of time, or like, oh, maybe that's why I'm doing this, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, well, at the end of the day, it's selfish, right? It's I want what I want, and I want it now, so I'm going to do that. I don't care what the cost is. That's the conversation at play, right? So it's a deep selfishness and entitlement. I love when people say this. People come on and say it's natural. It's totally natural. It's biologically, it's a biological thing wired in men. And I'm like, no, it's not. It's a whole industry fueled around really disrupting your soul, the pornography industry, that is. Are sexual urges biological? Yes. Is masturbation or a desire to masturbate or self-pleasure? Again, I'm I'm not being like rigid on that, but is there a natural tendency towards that? Yes. Right. Is mating natural and biological? Yes. Is pornography, for what we understand pornography today, is that biological? No. That's like saying, Lord of the Rings is biological. No, it's not. It's a movie.
Right.
It's not something that just sprang to be because of nature. Same with the pornography industry.
And not to mention pornography, if I'm correct, and you can correct me because you probably know the stats better than I do, it's on the cutting edge of technology. It makes more money than NFL, MLB, hockey, all pro sports teams combined. I mean, like, it's probably the wealthiest industry, that's entertainment oriented, if you can call it entertainment. But I mean, in all honesty, you're going in, and what's fascinating is, we had this conversation off camera a little bit, and I was like, man, you're going against the biggest, industry. And when I'll get personal with this one. This is a little bit of peek into the soul on this one. One of my biggest struggles in the cigar industry, to be honest with you, is the way that women are objectified for the sake of selling cigars. I see it all the time, and women love. I mean, it happens all the time. The sexier woman you get, the better your sales are, or anything else like that. And the objectification of women is the very first step into, everything else. And that's just me. I'm in the cigar industry. That's just it. And it's very minor compared to other industries, if you would, because it's just not that big. But in the industry overall, do you feel and do you see sex becoming the biggest main attraction, sexual pleasure to sell anything? And do you think that's contributing to the porn addiction at this point?
Yeah, well, I mean, sex sells. There's no doubt about that, and you can't get away from it. And if it's free, you're the product. So like all these sites,
wow, God, I've never heard that before. It's so mind blowing.
Yeah, all these porn sites are free. You're the product,
dude. That's so
paying
crazy.
You're paying with your soul, because a little part of your soul is taken away every time that you watch pornography.
That's mind blowing.
So yeah, I mean, it just fuels this trap of, do this. This is going to feel good. This is going to taste good, and it does for like a half a second, but then it leaves you feeling emptier and full of shame.
I hope every guy heard that. I hope you heard it. I hope it like resonated with you. You're the product.
Yeah.
You're the one being used. It's your soul being taken. Oh my gosh, dude. What?
Yeah. I mean, look
how
at what
satanic is that?
Look at what it takes from your relationship.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Like you think, oh no, it's porn. It's free. I'm not paying. It's like, no, it's not.
Man.
Your marriage is suffering. Go ask your wife how she feels about it, if you're willing to be honest with her about it.
Right.
She doesn't like it. And if she says she does, like, there's a lot of women I've talked to where I call them the cool girls. They're like, oh yeah, it's fine. And then when I actually lay out what's actually going on, in almost every case, they're like, oh yeah, that's actually a problem. I actually want somebody who's committed to me and only me. Yeah.
There is a rather large contingent, I would ask the question, I wonder how you feel about this, of guys that have seen sexual addiction or pornography be a net negative, obviously, in culture. And Hollywood stars, things like that, guys are coming out, and they're pretty much against it at this point, which is pretty interesting. Russell Brand be one of those guys, some other guys out there that are saying, yeah, it's a net negative, you know, at this point. Have you had conversations with anyone like that has come out of it and been like, yeah, this is not helpful for human flourishing and family foundation and everything else like that?
Yeah. So when I do my TikTok lives, particularly, I mean, you never know who's going to come on those.
Right.
So, a lot of times it's people that just want to argue with me, but a lot of times there are people who want to share their story and be like, I have changed my perspective. I am clean from this. I am doing the healing. I haven't had, like, with somebody of celebrity stature, I haven't had a conversation like that, but somebody else comes to mind is, Joshua Broom, I think is his name. He's a former porn star. He was interviewed on the Michael Knowles show. It's a great interview. It's like an hour and 45 minutes long. It's fantastic. So there's definitely a lot of people like that who kind of awaken to that. The story comes to mind, though. It's kind of related. I was in Vegas a couple of weeks ago for the Consumer Electronics Show, the largest convention of dorks.
Yeah, dude.
Yeah. In the world. And on my way home, I'm sitting in the Las Vegas airport, and I'm sitting, like there's kind of like that one row of seats before the gate that generally is for like the family pre-boarding area or the people in wheelchairs and all that. I'm sitting in one of those chairs. There's one seat next to me, and this guy comes and sit down, and immediately once he sits down, there's an older lady. I wouldn't say she was like super old and elderly. Like she wasn't in a wheelchair or walker or anything, but she was for sure a grandma.
Mm-hmm.
And he gets up and goes over to her and goes, "Would you like my seat?" And she's like, "Oh, no, I'm fine." All right. She was able-bodied, right? Probably 65 years old or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
She declines. He comes and sits down. And immediately the thought I had in my head is, I'm like, there's no way this guy watches porn. That's just what I thought. I'm like, I can spot him. So I'm like, well, that's interesting. And so I said to him, I say, "Hey, you don't see that every day," right? Basically like a young guy. He was probably about 40, a young guy offering up his seat.
Young now.
Yeah.
We're in the 40. We're in the 40. I'm 49.
Well,
How old are you?
I'm almost 39.
39. Yeah. So you're almost 40.
Yeah.
Now, with the older
40
you
year
get,
olds
the
are
younger.
young.
Yeah, they're young. They're young. Yeah. Go ahead, man.
20
Sorry.
something.
No, JB's 32. 32.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Man.
33, dude.
You're 33. That's
All
right. 33. Okay.
I just look 22.
Yeah.
You do,
there you
yeah.
go. Anyway, so I say, that's not something you see every day. Basically, like a young person offering their seat to a grandma.
Mm-hmm.
And then he's like, "Yeah," and he points at my hoodie. I was wearing my hoodie. He's like, "That's not something you see every day either." And I'm
Right.
like, "Yeah." I'm like, "Yeah, I'm a porn coach." And I go, "Let me ask you a question. Do you watch porn?" He's like, "Nope." And I go, "I knew it," right? Because somebody who, and I'm over generalizing, right?
Right,
But somebody
right,
who's
right.
deep in a pornography addiction wouldn't have the common courtesy to go out of his way and treat another woman with dignity and respect.
Well, yeah, they're not seeing them treated that way.
They're not
Right.
they're seeing them as objects.
Right.
And he
right,
goes,
right.
"Nope." I didn't dive into his whole story, right? But he's like, "No, I'm deeply committed to not." He's got kids, and they've read all the books to the kids and educating and training them. And I was like, I actually told him I was going to share this story, so now I can actually publish it. But back to like people talking about it, there is this contingency of people who are realizing how bad and destructive this is.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of people talking about it, and they do exist, right? There
Right,
are
right.
people out there who exist who want to combat this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I just had a thought, and I was going to go down a road. I think I'll save it. For
Let's go down the road.
Well, no. It's when the thing that he did with that older lady. I mean, when you're into an addiction, and you're what addictions are? You were talking about selfishness, particularly porn is selfishness. You don't see anything, and you don't see any
Right, that
woman,
was a selfless act.
Yeah, you don't see
Yeah.
any woman as valuable unless she can give you pleasure.
Right.
And that woman's not going to give you pleasure in that sitting next to an airport, right? Yeah.
Ma'am, you want my chair? We need to go to the
Right,
family
right,
restroom
right.
real quick first, though.
So as a result, I can see that playing into women who are doing things like, and that's probably one of the things I think whatever podcast does pretty well, is they're explaining to the OnlyFans models. I mean, your value that you're giving to the world is just sexual pleasure. That's the only thing you have a value to give. And so as a result, that's the only thing you can offer. And so you're wanting a high value man. They talk about that a lot. The high value man, and you can't offer anything that's of high value at that point. And so the one thing that I think it's interesting is that when you talked about porn being such a selfish act and everything's about you, then you see every woman that way.
Yeah.
And every woman, include. But it's funny. Do the porn addicts think the same way about their moms, their sisters, their cousins? I mean, things like that are people that are in their life. Because I had a story that I heard from Triple X Church a long time ago that they asked. Ron Jeremy called the guy from Triple X Church. I heard a story. I don't know if it's true, but called somebody and said, "Could you minister to my daughter? Could you talk about this? Because I don't want my daughter experiencing anything like this." So I think it's interesting that a lot of guys who might be addicted to porn are like, "This is good for me. I don't want my kids, my sons, my daughters, or anybody ever knowing about this or feeling this way that I feel." What say you on that?
Yeah. 9 questions in one again.
I'm sorry.
That should be the title of this episode. So a couple things.
100 questions, 2 answers.
Yeah. One is, at the end of the day, people are what they do. People are what they do. If you want to know what somebody actually believes, look at what they do. Right? Ron Jeremy, he can claim he wants that. He can claim he's against it, but
Sure.
what do his actions indicate?
Right.
Right.
He in jail, isn't he?
I believe
Oh,
so.
yeah.
Yeah, he
Yes,
got
yeah.
caught for pedophilia or something like that.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is he dead?
Nah, he's in
He's
jail.
just in
though.
jail. Yeah, no, I know he went to jail. I was wondering if he died in jail.
He got caught.
Yeah. So you are what you do. So there's that's just how you can dismantle what somebody actually believes, right? Part of my whole life awakening, spiritual awakening, whatever you want to call it, is what do I actually believe about certain things? I used to be gung-ho about all sorts of things that I thought I believed. When I actually started like journaling through, like, what do I actually believe in this? And the framework I did that was, what would I give my life for? And that'll tell you what you actually believe.
Right.
A lot of people claim that they believe in stuff, but when rubber meets the road, what do you actually believe?
Yeah, what are you going to take that bullet for?
Yeah, and do your actions indicate that? Second thing that comes to mind, what was the first part of your question?
I don't remember now.
Gosh,
Sorry, dude.
It was going to be so
It was
good.
too close. Yeah, too close to short term made me loss.
Yeah,
but I think the gist is when you've treated so many people, when you've if porn is so self-addicting, right, and it's so selfish oriented, it devalues everyone around you.
I got it.
Okay.
All right. So there's this great quote from The Porn Myth. It's a book by Matt Fradd, The Porn Myth. It's a non-religious presentation.
I've read it. Yeah, it's a good book.
So good.
Yeah, it's a very good book.
Non-religious presentation on all the myths about porn, coming from a Catholic priest. I don't know what his exact title is. He's a YouTuber essentially, but it's a non-religious presentation. And probably one of the best things in there is that he says the problem with porn is not that it shows too much of a person. It's that it shows too little of a person. So it reduces a person down to just their sexual value. Do people have sexual value? Yes, they do. But that's one part of a person.
Yeah.
So that's what porn trains you to do, is to think about a person as only their sexual value and to dismiss everything else. And it's like intimacy can't happen when you're only focused on a person's sexual value. And then, it reinforces the selfishness as I just need this for sexual pleasure. And, it goes from there. Until you can see the whole person, you're probably not going to stand up and try to offer your seat to the older lady at the airport.
There's a lot into that too, when you look at it from the perspective of like young men getting into relationships with women, especially with like internet dating and app dating and things like that now. If I'm a young man and I'm dating a woman, what social media and all these other things are telling people is that you don't like what you have, you go get something else. And if you don't like that, you just go ask this chick online and she'll send it to you. Your girlfriend at home ain't doing it for you? Just go ask this chick. Pay her. She'll send it to you. Yeah. And I actually have some friends that recently are having some issues and are probably not going to be together because of of something similar to this. And I really wish I would have met you beforehand, because I think it's past them being able to repair it. And man, I wish I would have had somebody like you in my back pocket to offer to them to potentially help with that, or even had more knowledge on it. Cause I don't know. Nobody talks to me about being addicted to porn. None of my dudes are going to come to me and be like, dude, I can't stop watching porn.
No guys are talking about this, dude.
No.
Not in your friend groups necessarily.
Yeah.
You're not,
and if they do, we probably just laugh at him and we're like, damn, dude, is your shit crooked?
Right. I think that's one of the misnomers, that you can't talk about this around your buddies. You can't talk about this like, hey man, I need to get out of this stuff, man. This is killing me.
But see, when you're in high school and you're growing up, like that's probably when I experienced any kind of porn the most growing up, was in high school and getting into like probably my first couple of years of college, right? So in high school, I had a buddy who had a server, and he would literally just burn you any movie you wanted, any DVD, any film. You just tell him what you want. He burned it and he brought it to school and sold you a DVD of it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the thing is even if it is talked about amongst social circles like that, usually nobody knows what to actually do with it. So you have to just make fun of it.
Yeah.
Right. You have to make fun of it so that everybody can feel okay. And then you stuff it back down and never talk about it again. But in reality, each person's probably actually dying inside saying, I have this unwanted behavior and I don't know how to get rid of it.
Yeah, like as kids, you kind of promote it a little bit, right? With your buddies. You're like, oh, dude, you got the good videos, right? Like, you know. But then when we get older, like you're saying, how many of those kids or of our own friends have continued that and just don't say anything about it and never say anything?
9 out of 10.
Yeah, I think... I'm thinking about the very first time I saw fast access porn, which was not porn.
What is that, dude?
Fast access porn. I remember when the internet was invented, because you guys were so young.
What is fast? Okay.
Fast access porn, meaning like, I remember the old AOL days, getting online. And there was, I mean, that's when everyone started spamming, penis pills and everything else like that, and free porn sites. And I clicked on an email, and as it's downloading, it's like click, 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 click down the screen. I can obviously see what it is. I'm like, oh crap. And this is our family computer because we keep it out in public. And I'm like, trying to turn it off.
The centerfold
and my wife,
down.
right. And my wife's coming in and I'm like, oh my gosh, I unplugged the computer. I just unplugged the whole thing. I'm like, I don't know what happened right there. That's the craziest thing in the entire world. And I obviously knew what I was seeing and everything. I knew what was coming down there. And I was absolutely embarrassed. And I think that was crazy because that took forever. Now it's not, it's instant.
Yeah.
And it's not pictures, it's videos. Or you can go to, I mean,
I don't even want to know what VR is.
just so you know how it's, and this is somewhat silly. I understand when I say this, and please don't judge me. I know everyone at home's going to. I didn't understand what a cam gal was until 5-6 years ago. Mm-hmm. I didn't know what that was. I didn't know that occurred.
What is it?
Yeah, OnlyFans, basically. That's what it is.
No, I'm saying tell us what it is.
Well, a cam gal is somebody who's a sex worker and has a camera on and basically makes money out of doing things on camera for guys.
Like a virtual sex worker.
Right, essentially. So I didn't know that was, so when someone told me that, and the way that I found out about it, to be quite frank, was absolutely devastating. And somebody had mentioned that to me, and they're like, cam gal. I'm like, what's a cam? What are you talking about, cam gal? What is that? And they're like, this is what a cam gal is. I'm like, oh my gosh, that's crazy. Yeah. So that's, I mean, and they make so many great, there's so many great comments on so many different podcasts about how this is a net negative for your life and how it will be going forward. Not just for the guys who are, quote unquote simping to watch these girls, but for the women in particular in the future. I mean, the overall, like I'm curious to what you think about this, Austin, to be honest with you. The overall net negative of what this is potentially having is 50% of people, marriage is down 50%. Like 50% less people are getting married now as opposed to 10 years ago, by the way. Just 10 years, all right? Giving birth to children is down 40%. These are Gallup polls. You can go look at it, by the way. Okay, Gallup polls. And so what that does in society where marriage and the family was like the stabilization of a society, that's getting ready to actually uproot American society in general. And I think the porn addiction or pornography in general is a big play into that,
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what's going to happen with that, obviously, but it's terrible. It's like ruining our culture, ruining our society, and hijacking people's brains.
When did you get married? How old were you?
2011. I was 26 years old.
26? JB, yeah. How old were you when you got married?
26.
26? Okay. I was 21.
Yeah.
I was 21 when I got married.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, I
it's crazy.
honestly, I don't know the answer, right? Because I talked to so many people, so many women who are like, my boyfriend won't stop watching porn. My fiance won't stop. My husband won't stop. I say, if every woman decided that they won't be in a relationship with a man who watches porn, guess what would happen?
There wouldn't be any more marriages. There wouldn't be any more society.
Well, that's one way.
Right. I would 99 out of 10 less marriages.
Right. Yeah.
I would like to think that men would stop watching porn.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It's like they would get the feedback real quick. This is not a desirable trait.
Right. Right.
So I need to change so that I can become a more desirable mate and partner.
Do you coach women to do that? Do you coach women to say...
that's what my betrayal trauma groups are about.
Good.
It's like, look, don't focus on his behavior. Why are you tolerating this? Until you really put your foot down and give him the gift of desperation, meaning I won't tolerate this anymore. Your marriage, your ability to be a father, everything is on the line because I'm going to walk out if you don't shape up. They're going to shape up once they reach that low point of desperation. And so again, and I also tell women, is what you really want is just a guy who doesn't watch porn? Like if someone were to say, what's your ideal partner? I want a guy who doesn't watch porn. That's pretty lame. Right?
You want to have some
if that's your bar.
Yeah, no, honestly, many women are in that boat where they're like, gosh, it's so prevalent. That's all I want. But you got what I'm saying? It's like, no, I want a guy who's going somewhere in life, who's passionate, who has good values, who has a career, who wants to be a father, who's loving, caring, kind, compassionate. Those are who's going to protect me, love me, put a roof over my. That's what a woman wants, generally speaking, right? And if you're doing all those things, generally, you're not going to be watching porn,
right? Because you're time for it.
Yeah, because it's it's not loving to be watching porn and truly doing those things. Right. So. That message for the women out there is, the question I ask is, when did you decide, if you know that pornography is okay in your relationship, or rather it's prevalent, like say your partner, your husband, whatever, has been watching porn prolonged over 5, 10, 20 years. You can talk about their behavior till you're blue in the face. But the question for you is, when did you decide that you're okay with being in a relationship where there's pornography? Because the reality of your situation, if you were to look at what's being produced, is you're okay with that. You've resigned yourself. You've resigned a part of you to say, I'm not going to fight this fight. I'm just going to tolerate it. And now you've given a part of yourself away. Instead of saying, I will not tolerate this. I will not be here. I'm going to take a stand and do something different. And that's what my women's group's all about. It's like, when will you start actually taking a stand for what you believe in and don't tolerate it anymore? In love, right? Healing is possible. Hope is possible. But, you know, some of these women, 20, 30, 40 years of fighting this fight, but they're actually not fighting the fight. They've just resigned themselves to this is how it's always going to be.
Right. Wow. Well, guys, I assume that there's a ton of questions out there for Austin, and he's going to tell you exactly where you can email him and find him on social media and everything like that, so that I don't get all the hate mail. So, Austin, please tell everybody where they can find you online.
Yeah, so Porn Coach, Pxrn Coach. TikTok is the main platform I'm on. I live stream 3-4 times a week, usually at night, around 10 p.m. Eastern time. You can also go to my website, porncoach.com, pxrncoach.com. I do group coaching as well as one-on-one coaching, both for men dealing with porn addiction and women dealing with betrayal trauma. And the groups I have are unlike any other. It's a space where you can just be open and vulnerable with what's going on in your life to choose a new path forward. And so I've got group times on that. It's listed on my website. Love to have you.
We'll link his website and everything else to get a hold of him down below in the description. So once again, Austin, thank you so much for coming here today, dude. This was awesome. This was great. And this isn't finished. We got to have you get back on here again, because not only is a free cigar in it for you, but it's obviously, or should I say FDA's listening, I charge you a penny. With all that said, guys, we want to thank Austin so much for coming out so much. I really do appreciate that. And any questions, comments, or insults you guys have, please drop them in the comments below. And with that said, guys, we're out of here like last year. Peace.
Thank you. See ya.